Moray Rabotai, we are starting Siman Kuf Lamed Hey Seif Gimel, in continuation of our Shulchan Aruch and Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, the regular prints of Mishna Berura. Maran writes, Kohen Koreh Batorah Rishon. There is a hierarchy of getting aliyot. Kohen is first, Levi is second, and only then you could have the regular Yisraelim. V'acharav Levi, v'acharav Yisrael, and this is straight from a Gemara, surprisingly not from Masechet Brachot, but it's Masechet Gitin, Daf Nun Tet Amud Aleph, and the Mishnah Berura writes, this is learned from a pasuk in Vayikra, V'kidashto, that you should give everything of Kedusha first to the Kohen. He is the one that starts B'kol Davar Sheb'Kedusha. Chazal learned from this the kol davar sheb'kedusha liftoach rishon ulvarech rishon, to start first, to say the bracha first. V'litol mana yafa rishon, you give him the first nice portion first. Umikol makom im ratza kohen lachlok kavod l'rabo, if a kohen wants to give kavod to his rebbe, lemi shegadol mimenu, or even if he's not a rebbe but he is bigger than the kohen in chokhmah, in Torah, then of course hareshut beyado, he could give the kavod to him. Aval le'inyan likrot b'Torah bebet knesset, but for reading first aliyah in the Torah in Bet Knesset, Chazal already made an enactment, a takana, because of Darkei Shalom. Because of Darkei Shalom, there should be no machloket. Chazal said Kohen will go first, Levi will go second, and then Yisraelim, and therefore, because of that, Ena Kohen va'alevi yecholim limchol. A Kohen and a Levi cannot be mochel der kavod. Ela davka Kohen koreh rishon v'acharav Levi v'acharav Yisrael kedei shelo yavod hadavar li'le machloket. We do it this way to prevent machloket from happening. Shekol echad yomar ani gadol ve'ekra rishon. Everyone is going to say, "Oh, I'm bigger. I finished Shas twice." He says, well, in last Gilgul I finished it 3 times. It's going to be very, to a hierarchy of people. Hashem yir'eh lelvav, Adam yir'eh la'inayim. We don't know who is bigger than who. It's going to be very difficult. So therefore, we try to avoid that. Ve'en chiluk ben Shabbat v'Yom Tov. Does not make a difference. Shabbat, Yom Tov, Sheni, Chamishi, Shabbat afternoon, makes no difference. Any time that you have Kriyat Torah, it will be the same way. Now, what happens if you don't have a Kohen in the Bet Knesset? Right? Then you go after the person that's gadol bechokhmah or beminyan. Go after someone that is more respectable, has a bigger tameh hacham. Afal pi she'acher gadol b'shanim. Even if you have someone that's older, it doesn't go by age. It goes by zaken zeh shekana chokhmah. The real respect in the Torah community is who knows more Torah, who is a greater scholar, closer to Hashem in that way, and that's the criteria, the determining factor. So over here, the Mishnah Berura that says Kohen reads first in the Torah. What if the Kohen is a very young kid, right? The Kaf HaChaim writes, still he's going to read first. It's not, even though that you have a 90-year-old massive Tameh Hacham, still the Kohen reads first because, again, we don't want to create machloket. We keep it as a hierarchy, even though that's not really respectful for the kavod. If he was not a Kohen, we don't ask the little Kohen to go out of the shul and give the aliyah to the elderly, more respectable person, or the Tameh Hacham. If you only have a Kohen that's under bar mitzvah, now what do you do? Why is this a question, by the way? Because Shulchan Aruch writes, Meikar adin katan ole miminyan shiva. A katan could get an aliyah on Shabbat. The katan could get an aliyah. That's the ikar adin. Now there are different communities have a clear minhag that they don't give aliyot to the ketanim, and so on. And that's a question every community, of course, has to follow the legitimate minhagim that they have. But at the same time, the Kaf HaChaim writes, we do not give a katan aliyat kohen if there are other people. That's not something lechatchila that we do. Even though if it's a kohen, doesn't make a difference. The minhag is we don't give him an aliyah to a kohen that's katan. But because of dealing with the Shulchan Aruch that katan ole miminyan shiva, we ask him to leave. This is something that people are not necessarily mindful, because to have a kohen in the shul even if he's a katan, when you know that katan is oleh minyan shiv'ah, and not to give him aliyah, that's kind of like going against the takana. But to give him aliyah is going against the minhag. So what you do is you throw a candy outside. You ask him to nicely, without hurting his feelings. You ask him to stand out until the aliyat kohen is over. But at the same time, there are others who just follow the Shulchan Aruch. Ramor Chaliyahu, for instance, it said in his name that he would give the aliyah actually to the kohen that's katan. But again, at the same time, he agreed that if you have a clear minhag, that you should follow the minhag. Now, if a kohen enters the shul, but he's not davening with them, he is collecting tzedakah. He's coming to call somebody, and he's passing to go through Bet Midrash to learn. So he happens to be there when you need aliyat kohen, but he's not part of the minyan at all. He's just passing through. In that case, when they bring out the Torah, there are those who say that even though that he has not davened with the tzibur, we should still give him the aliyah because there's a kohen in the shul. There's a kohen in the shul. You call him up because that's part of the takana of Chazal, and there are those who say that you don't necessarily need to reckon with him. He's passing through. You could let him go, and even if you don't have a kohen, then you'll bring up a Yisrael. No problem with that. Now, what if you have a kohen that's zaken? He's always been getting the aliyat kohen in this shul every week. His aliyah rishona always has been his, and now you have another kohen that comes to shul. Is a young kohen that enters, and he also wants to get an aliyah. He says, "Okay, it's a 4 Shabbatot a month. I'll get 2. You get 2. Right? There's enough for both. What's the halacha? Right? The minhag was not like that because this kohen was not there, but now he is there. So he insists to have the aliyah. The Kaf Chaim writes that if that kohen, the young kohen, is not a Talmid Chacham, then he does not necessarily get to choose that he's going to have 2 of the 4 weeks, and in order to make sure that people know that he's a kohen, he's kasher, and so on and so forth, he could go on Shabbat Mincha. You don't have enough to break the minhag that this person always has been getting the aliyah rishona, and in Monday and Thursdays, he could go get one, he could get one, but don't break the minhag. Now, this is a debated concept, and if these things happen, they should be discussed with a proper, competent moreh hora'ah. These things gets into the laws of minhagim and chazakot and so on and so forth, complicated beyond the scope of this talk, but nevertheless, this is brought by the Kaf Chaim. And again, it's something to be mindful of. Now, if a person comes to a place and he says, "I'm a kohen," we have no idea what his lineage is. Comes into town, he says, "What's your last name?" Kohen Gadol, Kohen Kadosh, Kohen. I'm a kohen, right? We have no idea if he's not a kohen. So says the Kaf Chaim, if he is a Ben Torah, he's Yireh Shamayim, he learns, he knows, right? And he says, "I am from so and so place." He gives you a reference of where he is coming from that you can now research. Then he is Ne'eman. Because again, how do you have, like Havadia has this story that there was a kohen that would daven with them, and at some point Havadia noticed that this fellow is not going to Duchen anymore. So he went to him, he says, "What happened?" He says, "I'm finished." He said, "What's finished?" He said, "I only made a neder to be a kohen for 50 years. My 50 years is up." So now, this is a very bizarre story, of course, but this actually has been debated. The Maharashdam, in the early Kadmonim, the early Acharonim, he has a tshuva about the chazaka of kihuna, the Magen Avraham in the halachot of Birkat Hamazon. He asks this question. So we just learned in Shulchan Aruch that Kohen, Kidashto, you're supposed to be mevarech tchila, he's supposed to say the bracha first, and so on. So what happened with that? We're not makpid, says the Magen Avraham, to give the benching to the Kohen. We should. We don't. And he says, surprising, he says, maybe it's because the chazakah of Kehuna is not a very, very strong chazakah. They say they're a Kohen, maybe it's not 100%, maybe. Others very vehemently disagree with this. The Marashtam says the chazakah Kehuna is strong. Actually, Rabbi Doron, in his Tshuvot, Binyan Av Chelek Gimel, he wrote a Tshuvah, Rabbi Doron. He was asked that there is a certain city that the majority of people are Kohanim, a lot of Kohanim. It's not proportional. And he goes through this whole sugya, and he says, no, you could still rely on their Kehuna, you could do Pidyon HaBen with them, and so on and so forth. So, halachically speaking, you have to be very careful not to, Chas v'Shalom, use your power of humor on these things. It's not something that you want to mock or make fun of, but at the same time, this has been debated within the past few hundred years as Chizkat Kehuna, but it's important that the Kohen should be able to substantiate his claim. When he comes to town, he says, I'm a Kohen. Who knows he's a Kohen? Maybe he's making it up, right? Everyone knows the story in Masechet Shabbat of Lamed Aleph. This goy that came to Hillel said, I want to become a Jew, but al menat sheyeh Kohen Gadol. I want to become Kohen Gadol. Right? He wanted to wear the vestige of Kohen Gadol. So Shammai kicked him out, and he said, okay, let's learn halachot. Kohen Gadol can't be Amaretz. And then he realized afterwards on his own that only a Kohen could be. But imagine a person that wants to be a Kohen and goes to a new city and says, okay, I'm Mr. Kohen. So you have to be able to substantiate. So if he's a Ben Torah, he's Yeresh Shamayim, he's from, and he says, I'm coming from here, so he could now research his lineage, he is Ne'eman. By the way, based on something similar to this, Rav Moshe Feinstein allegedly paskined that a person that his whole claim to Kehuna comes from the fact that he heard from his father that they are Kohanim, and his father did not keep anything in the Torah. His grandfather didn't keep anything in the Torah. There's no family member that's from. So Rav Moshe said, maybe he's not really a Kohen, and this makes a difference for marriages that would be illegitimate with a Kohen. If a Kohen is married a Gioret or a Gerusha and so on, again, beyond the scope of this little talk here, but this is all where it starts, that you have to be able to substantiate a claim of Kehuna, and therefore, if he's Amaretz, and he comes from a far land that we cannot research who he was, where he was, his whereabouts are not known, and it's not researchable necessarily. In that case, it's not Ne'eman necessarily to say he's a Kohen, unless other people testify on him that he's a Kohen. And again, nowadays, Baruch Hashem, many poskim write that nowadays is easy. You could easily in 5 minutes find out everything, or almost everything about the person, so it's much easier, and therefore it's more of an emanut in that way, to give him aliyah rishona, and so on, and so forth. Now, this you have to give the kavod first, the Kohanim. The Kaf Chaim writes about the chiyuv of respecting Kohanim in that way, that this is a machloket, whether it's a biblical or the Rabbanan. And makes nafkaminas. If it's a deoraita thing, then you have to be much more mindful, because the pasuk says v'kidashto, and Chazal darshin this pasuk in the Gemara to mean you have to respect him to be first. So if you say this is a drasha gemura, then the halacha that comes from it will be a biblical halacha. And then even if you have safek, you have to be machmir, right? Or if you say the whole thing is the Rabbanan, and they just attached it to the pasuk to make it more meaningful, then it will be, if it's asmachta, it will be much more lenient. So that machloket stands, whether or not this is a din deoraita. It potentially could even be a din deoraita. Now, the fact that in Bet Knesset, Kohen should not be mochel his kavod to a Tamei Chacham, but if you have a Tamei Chacham that is well known to the whole country, he's nasi, he's by all objective standards, he is head and shoulder and much more higher than everyone else, is a Chacham muflag that everyone knows, everyone respects. Then of course no Kohen is going to create machloket that this Kohen is giving this kavod to this Chacham, and hence that would be fine as well. As we mentioned before, Chacham Obadia in his own private minyan, he always got aliyah rishona. No Kohen, even though the Kohanim were there, he always got Aliyah Rishona, it's a kavod of the Torah. It's the Torah. The Gemara says, a Kohen versus a Talmid Chacham. Talmid Chacham is always Keter Torah is much bigger than Keter Kehuna, and afilu a Mamzer Talmid Chacham is better than Kohen Gadol Ha'Ma'aretz, says the Gemara. Mamzer that's Talmid Chacham is greater than a Kohen Gadol that's Ha'Ma'aretz. So that is something that we are very, very much mindful of as well. And if you don't have a Kohen, you go after who's the greatest person in the shul, in that minyan. If you have a Chacham that is Mamzer, are you talking of which, right? So if you have a case like that, the Kaf HaChaim says we take him up instead of a Kohen. If he's the biggest person there, in that case you don't have a Kohen there, you take him up, because again, the Gemara says, Mamzer Talmid Chacham is bigger than a Kohen Gadol. Ha'Ma'aretz is a kavod of the Torah. It's not a kavod of the person, the ishiyut of the person. And the same would be that if you have a Chatan, you don't have a Kohen in the shul, you have a Chatan. A Chatan kimo melech, right? The Kaf HaChaim writes, you take the Chatan up as Aliyah Rishona, because again, the Chatan has a certain respect that has to be given to him. Chatan domeh lamelech, and therefore that would be the halacha. Now, let's do one more quick seif as well here. Haminhag hapashut she'afilu kohen ha'ma'aretz koreh likrot lifnei chacham gadol Yisrael. Even a kohen that's ha'ma'aretz, the minhag is that he will take aliyah rishona. Even if you have a chacham gadol b'Yisrael over there, he still will get it first. Ve'hu she'hakohen yodea likrot, and that's only if the kohen at least knows how to read, because back in the day, there's not a Baal Koreh. Everyone would read their own aliyah. That's lachatchila. That would be the way it should be done, and therefore it's only when he could actually read his aliyah. And Rama writes in parentheses that if he could read with the Shaliach Tzibur word for word, that's sufficient already, as we're going to discuss this in a few simanim from now. Because if he can't read, says the Shulchan Aruch, then how can you say bracha if you can't even verbalize the words, even after the Shaliach Tzibur reads and you can't say it with him? Then what bracha are you making? You're not reading the Torah. The bracha was nitkan, was instituted to be said on the reading of the Torah. Hence, he, at the very least, the minimum, he should be able to read after the Baal Koreh together with him. Now, even though that a lot of Rishonim hold that this takana of putting the Kohanim first was never meant to be for a Talmid Chacham, it was just for Amei Haaretz, right? It was never to put an Amei Haaretz before a Talmid Chacham. That's a direct disrespect to the Torah. So that would mean that if you have a Kohen that's Amei Haaretz and a Talmid Chacham that's not a Kohen in Israel, you would for sure give, according to all these Rishonim, you would give the first Aliyah to the Talmid Chacham and you push away the Kohen, according to that, right? But with all of that, the minhag has become like those poskim who say that this enactment of Chazal, this takana, did not necessarily have any exceptions. It just made a blanket takana that you always have. The minhag has evolved like that, even though that you have many Rishonim who hold not like that. That is our minhag, says the Mishnah Berura, that in Kriyat Torah in the Bet Knesset, because of Darkei Shalom, they did not differentiate between cases, because then everyone is going to start saying, well, I'm bigger than this Kohen. How dare you bring Amei Haaretz over here? He only finished Shas 5 times. I did 15 times. You're giving Natata Devarecha Leshiurim, like the Gemara says. You're giving your words to the decision and scrutiny of people. And that does not help anything. That actually may cause more machloket, because, whereas in normal life, people kind of like know the hierarchy, but if now you're going to give a thing to this Kohen, and this person is going to yell and scream that he's a bigger Talmid Chacham, now that being a very bad midah by itself, but that's how communities unfortunately are, and therefore, in order to avoid that machloket, Chazal did not differentiate between them. And if you have Chacham Gadol and you have a Kohen, you still give it to Kohen, that the Shulchan Aruch says, therefore, is not a bizayon to the kavod Torah. Once you know that this is the minhag, everyone knows it's the minhag. There's no bizayon to the kavod Torah. People know that this guy is not the Talmid Chacham. But as a Kohen, we're not trying to chas v'shalom degrade from the Torah. We're trying to give kavod to kehuna. That's all. It's not a disgrace for the Torah, because once the minhag is like this, there's no bizayon. It's not, we have no choice. It's not that we chose him versus him. It's the minhag, so he goes up, and nobody gives him more kavod because of that. Nobody gives him less kavod because of that, and therefore it would be fine. Now he has to be able to read. We said, and says the Chafetz Chaim, he has to be able to read according to Shulchan Aruch mitoch haktav, from the ktav of the Sefer Torah, as we will have in Kuf Lamed Tet later on. And the Ramah says it's sufficient if he could repeat after the Baal Koreh, that if there is no other Kohen, says the Mishnah Berura, that's only if you have no other. If you have another Kohen, that's not good enough. You have to give it to the other Kohen that could read from the Ktav. Now we're going to discuss this in Simanim, upcoming Simanim, Bezrat Hashem. And today the minhag is to likroto afal pi she'eno yodea likrot. Says the Chafetz Chaim, nowadays the minhag is we call up the Kohanim even if they can't read themselves, and even if they can't read with the Shaliach Tzibur from the Ktav, but only could repeat after the words of the Shaliach Tzibur. So if you have Am Haaretz that is not literate, can't really read from the Ktav with the Shaliach. So some people don't know how the Nekudot are, but once the Shaliach Tzibur reads, they could read Hebrew. But some people, they can't even do that. Says the Chafetz Chaim today, the minhag is, even if they can't read from the Ktav with the Shaliach Tzibur, but they could repeat after him, as he says, with the audio, that's also fine. We're mekel on that. On that, we're not really that particular. We say, generally speaking, people could say with Shaliach Tzibur, at least Baal Peh, and therefore we just let them come up to the Torah and get their aliyah. And again, there are those who add that at the end of the day, you should be careful that even if you don't give the Kohen that's Am Haaretz and aliyah, you always give it to the one that's Tancham. From time to time, you should give them. You have to be careful in the social sensitivities of a community as well, that he shouldn't be nifga, he should not be hurt, his feelings should not be hurt in that way. So that's something important to keep in mind. It's a difficult job for the Gabayim of the Bet Knesset, who to choose and how to go about all of these halachot, and at the same time be sensitive with the kavod of everyone. We'll continue, Sif Hey, in the days to come.